Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to episode 2 of our playthrough of Shores of Tripoli, the 2020 war game about the First Barbary War from Fort Circle Games. Now if you saw our first episode as we played the US against the AI bot of Tripoli, you'll know that we're cautiously optimistic that we did okay there. We held Tripoli to 3 of 12 gold coins that they would need to win the game in raiding, and we're able to build up a squadron of 3 gunboats that can help us in later parts of the war. But Tunisia has joined forces with Tripoli as allies, and our Swedish allies are going to be fleeing the Mediterranean pretty soon. And at some point we have to think about how we're going to shift from defense to offense to put the squeeze on Tripoli to extract some favorable peace conditions. So there's a lot yet to come, so stick around as we jump into episode 2. Let's do a quick recap of the action in 1801 and 1802. First of all, as the U.S. forces, our biggest goal in the first 2 years is to make sure that Tripoli doesn't win the game by amassing 12 gold coins via raiding. We've done a pretty good job so far because we've limited them to 3 gold coins out of the 12 that they would need. And our situation here outside of Tripoli is pretty good as the Corsair fleet is down to just 2 Corsairs. Now as we shift into 1803 and 1804, we want to still make sure that we keep our thumb on this rating because that can quickly go from we're doing pretty well to oops, we lost the war. Also, we're going to have to try to eliminate the Tunisian forces up here as one of Tripoli's new allies and make sure that Algiers and Morocco don't come into the war, or if they do come into the war, that we neutralize them quickly. As it gets to 1804 as well, we need to start shifting from defense to offense. We're going to bring our army into Alexandria, and in 1804 it'd be really nice if we could capture Dern. Now we're able to build up our fleet of gunboats here in Malta. We've got them maxed out at 3. Those could help us reduce these land forces here at Dern, which would make it easier for our land troops to come over and capture the city. So if by the 1804 as the US forces, we can contain Tripoli's raiding, neutralize their allies, and capture the city of Dern, will it be in pretty good shape to potentially win the game in 1805 or 1806? So that's the plan. Let's jump in and see how this goes. So the first thing that we do as we start out our new year here is we bring any reinforcements from the reinforcement track into the game. So we're going to move our 3 frigates from here. They will join our forces up in Gibraltar, so we'll move them in. And now we have 4 frigates in Gibraltar, greatly increasing the U.S. naval presence in the area. That's a good thing. The other thing we do at the beginning of each year is we draw 6 new cards as the U.S. forces here. We've picked up these 6 cards here, and we got some good ones. Most importantly, the one that I really like is this one called Bainbridge Supplies Intel, which is to take any card from the American discard pile and either place it in hand or play it immediately. This is a really strong card, but it's gonna allow us to replay some of the powerful cards that we've already used that aren't one-time cards. So that's a definite keeper. We've got a couple that we can get rid of pretty easily. This one here, Corsair, because we have to get down to 10. These are our 2 core cards. We had these 4, we picked up these 6. So the 2 core cards don't count. We have to reduce these 10 down to 8 cards. We're going to get rid of Corsairs Confiscated, which doesn't matter anymore because there's no Corsairs in the Gibraltar Harbor. And then Early Deployment, which allows us to get the following year's frigate early. But we're in pretty good shape with frigates, and I want to keep the other cards. So we're going to discard those and get those out of the game. And then it's going to leave us with these 8 cards in our hand, plus our 2 core cards, so we'll play with these 10. I'm liking what we picked up here. This Daring Stephen Decatur card is one that's going to help us when Tripoli gets a frigate, which will happen in these next 2 years, pretty certain. And the other one, General Eaton Attacks Dern. This is the card we need to launch the offensive on the harbor of Dern, on the city of Dern. So that one we should be able to play in 1804. That's a good card to have in hand now as well. So let's get started with 1803. Our biggest problem right now as the U.S. forces are these Tunisian Corsairs as an ally of Tripoli. We want to neutralize them as quickly as possible, and we have just the card to play to do that, which is a show of force. Move 3 American frigates to the harbor of an active ally of Tripoli and return all of the Corsairs from the harbor to the supply. So we are going to move our 3 new frigates in from Gibraltar. We'll put them here. We'll take all the Corsairs and move them off to Tripoli, to the supply, and we have neutralized that ally pretty quickly. Then as this is complete, these 3 frigates will go to the harbor of Malta, and that ends the U.S. turn. Tripoli has a strong card to play as well. Their AI rules call for this. It's one of their core cards in the solo game, which is Sweden Pays Tribute, and we play this if it's 1803, which it is. It says, Swedish frigates in the naval patrol zone of Tripoli are returned to the supply, and as well, Tripoli receives 2 gold coins, giving them a total now of 5 of the 12 they need for immediate victory. So as we get to the summer of 1803, we've contained Tripoli's raiding pretty well, and they only have 2 Corsairs in the harbor there. They don't have any allies active, so I think we're going to take advantage of this opportunity to try to reduce the army forces in Dern. So we're going to play the card here, Naval Movement, which allows us to move 4 frigates. So we're going to take the 3 that are in Malta, the 1 that is in Gibraltar, and move all 4 frigates here and do a naval bombardment. Now, by rule, we can also add these Corsairs in as well. And the naval bombardment works, we get 1 shot. Each frigate gets to roll 2 dice. Each Corsair gets to roll 1 die. On a die roll of 6, we have wiped out an army. So we're going to do these in 3 stages because our dice tower has trouble with more than 4 dice. So here's our first shot. We'll roll 11 dice here. Any 6s will reduce the army in Dern. Get nothing there. Let's try our second roll. Gah! Come on, US troops. Let's have our gunboats fire. We get 3 of those. There we go, finally, 1. Not necessarily the best performance by the US Navy here, but we'll take that 1 casualty inflicted on the Tripoli's armies here. So we remove 1 unit from the Dern defenses. We put our Naval Movement card into the discard pile, and then we return our frigates and our gunboats back to the harbor of Malta. Because none of the conditions allow these 2 Corsairs to raid for Tripoli, we are going to pick a card for them. And here is the card they have selected. Pirate raid with all the Corsairs from the harbor of Tangier, but there are no Corsairs there. So they will discard this card here to do the raid or build action. And there aren't 3 Corsairs in here, so this means this will become a build action. So Tripoli spends the summer of 1803 increasing their forces in Tripoli by 1 Corsair. In the fall of 1803, I don't see a ton of great stuff for us to do or kind of good cards to play. So we're going to discard Tribute Paid, which allows us to neutralize an ally of Tripoli. I think we're okay, because if we need to neutralize one, we can pull a card out of the discard pile to get that other show of force card. And we're going to send 1 frigate to Alexandria to set up that play, pull our other frigate in to bombard Dern. That allows us to bring our 3 gunboats back. So we're going to try again to see what we can do to neutralize Dern. We got 5 shots. We need 6s to take out an army. It'd be nice to get at least 1 of them here. Gah! We are not very good at naval bombardment. Another 0. God, that hurts. Our forces will retreat back to Malta, except for the ship, the frigate in Alexandria, which we leave there, and that ends our turn in the fall of 1803. Tripoli's AI rules once again control them to pull out a card from the deck. We have drawn Morocco Declares War, so let's take care of that. This brings 3 Corsairs into the harbor of Tangier to serve as Tripoli's ally. This is not a card we wanted to see. The odds were pretty low that one of those 2 were going to come up, but that's unfortunate for us. So Tripoli has a second ally. Well, Tunis has already been eliminated, but Tangier is now in the war for Tripoli's side. For winter 1803 as the US, we're going to try to neutralize Morocco as quickly as we can. We're going to play Banbridge Supplies Intel card, which is take any card from the American discard pile and either place it in hand or play it immediately. We search through the discard pile, we pull back out a show of force, which is to move 3 American frigates into the harbor of an ally and remove the Corsairs that are there. So we will pull out the 3 Corsairs from Morocco. That will quickly neutralize Tripoli's allies there. And then the nice thing about these cards is that they're replayable. So these are going to go into the discard pile rather than the extinguished pile, which means that we could conceivably access them in 1805 or 1806 again. The frigates return from Morocco to the harbor of Malta, and that ends the US turn in the winter of 1803. So once again, Tripoli doesn't have 5 Corsairs and none of the other cards come into play. So we're going to draw a card from the deck and we get Tripoli acquires Corsairs. Place 2 Tripolitan Corsairs in the harbor of Tripoli. That will give them 5, which strengthens them quite a bit. And we only have 3 here in the patrol zone around Tripoli, so that makes me a little bit nervous here. We end 1803 now, however, and let's shuffle off into 1804. So as we start 1804, we have a couple of moves to make. The first thing is we bring in the 1804 frigate up to the harbor of Gibraltar. That gives the U.S. Navy 8 frigates in the game right now, which is the maximum force we can have. It's also worth mentioning now, too, that a second way for Tripoli to win the game is for them to sink 4 U.S. frigates. And that will come into play now in this back half of the game. We've picked our last 6 cards, and this clears the deck. We've now seen all 24 cards in the American deck that you can pick up. These were our 2 core cards left over from the previous turn, from the previous year. These were our 4 cards that we had left in our hand from our previous turn. These are the 6 that we picked up. That gives us 10 cards, excluding the core cards, that we now have to whittle down to 8 before 1804 starts. But it's worth mentioning now to go back and take a look at this card that's called Treaty of Peace and Amity, because this, I think, is the easiest way for the U.S. forces to win. And in order to do that, we have to meet 4 conditions. It has to be the fall of 1805 or later, so that would be next year's turn. The cities of Algiers, Tangier, and Tunis are all at peace, which means no Corsairs in those cities. We've already wiped out 2 of them, and Algiers doesn't have any, so we would meet that condition right now. The city of Dern has been captured, which we haven't met, but I'm hopeful that we might be able to get that this year. And then lastly, there are no Tripolitan frigates in the harbor of Tripoli. And I mention that because we have here a card called Burn the Philadelphia, the Daring Stephen Decatur, and then Launch the Intrepid, which are cards that will actually help us if we try to sink the frigates that are in Tripoli's harbor. Now you might be saying, well, wait a second, Tripoli doesn't have any frigates. They're going to automatically get one when we capture Dern, and there's a card they could actually draw that could give them a second one. So being able to sink the frigates in Tripoli Harbor is going to be a key condition for us to meet in order to be able to reach that peace treaty. So I definitely want to keep these cards in our hand because those are going to be helpful should those conditions are met. We want to keep this card here for attacking Dern. General Eaton attacks Dern. And then we also want to keep this one here, which is very nice. Lieutenant Sterrett is in pursuit. This is playable when making an interception roll. Each American frigate may roll 3 dice instead of 2, and I have an idea how we can use that right away, perhaps to make a really strong move. So we're going to throw out, we're going to discard 2 cards here. Send in the Marines, which is useful if we're assaulting Tripoli, which would be very late in the game. And then Preble's Boys takes aim, which is useful if we're having a naval battle in a harbor. And neither of those conditions, I think, will come up this year. So I think those are probably the easiest ones to discard. That'll leave us these 8 cards plus our 2 core cards in our hand. So we'll get started now with 1804. Normally, I'd be thinking to play this card right now, which is Hammett's Army Created. Playable if it's the spring of 1804, and there's at least 1 American frigate in Alexandria, which there is. We could place our 1 Marine and 5 Arab infantry units in the city of Alexandria. That would get us in a position to attack Dern in the next season. However, we're going to try something a little bit different. Instead of that, we're going to play Naval Movement, which is to move up to 4 American frigates and resolve any battles that may result. We're going to take the 3 frigates from Malta and the new frigate that came into Gibraltar and all move them into the harbor here, the patrol zone outside of Tripoli. And what we're trying to do is we know that the Corsairs have 5, the Tripoli forces have 5 Corsairs, so we know they're going to raid in this season. And when they do, we're going to have 7 frigates here waiting for them, and we're then going to play this Lieutenant Sterrett in Pursuit card, which gives us 3 rolls instead of 2 for each frigate. That's going to give us 21 rolls, which should allow us, on average, it should allow us to sink 3 to 4 of those Corsairs and put a huge dent in Tripoli's kind of raiding capacity. So that's the play we're setting up, and we're going to play this Naval Movement card, keep those frigates here, and now let's go to Tripoli's turn where they'll start that raid. Alrighty, let's go to the spring of 1804 for Tripoli. Their card that comes into play is this 5 Corsair check, which they don't discard. It just automatically stays in play if none of the other conditions prior to that are met, which they aren't. So Tripoli, therefore, is going to send these 5 Corsairs out on a raid, and we have 7 frigates waiting for them. We're now going to play Lieutenant Sterrett in Pursuit. There's a battle card for the U.S. Whoops, causes a little bit of havoc here in the city of Benghazi as well, and knocks over a Corsair, but we'll sort that out. So we're going to play this one here, which allows us to roll, each frigate may roll 3 dice instead of 2. So and this card is discarded. Our interception roll, not discarded, but is extinguished from play. Our interception rolls are going to be 7 times 3, which is 21. Because we have issues with our dice roll tower, we're going to roll 4 at a time. Hopefully we can get at least 3 frigates here. Here's our first attack. Oops, that one's on the edge. That counts, however. This was a 2. 2, 5, 1, 1. That is no good for us here. God, okay, so not a good start for us. That's 4 rolls. Let's keep going here. There's 1. Good. So 8 rolls, and we've got 1 hit now. Let's go for our next 4. God, nothing. 12 rolls and only 1 hit. Hopefully our luck will get better here. I'm going to switch these dice out. I'm going to get the dice rolled with dice with 6 on them. Going for 16. Yes, second hit. Okay, we've got 16. Let's go for our last 4. Come on, give us 2 here. Oh, I was off. We got 1. 1 missed, so that's another one. That's 3, and we have 2 dice left to roll. 3. Nevertheless, that's still pretty good. We're going to remove 3 Corsairs from the raiding forces of Tripoli, and these remaining 2 Corsairs now will sail out into the Mediterranean, and they will be able to raid. So we'll go from that then to now being able to roll for their raiding rolls. They get 2 dice rolls. They get gold coins and signifying the capturing of merchant ships on rolls of 5s or 6s. 1 misses. They get a 4. That will lock that one in. And a 5. So they do get 1 gold coin, which means they now have 6 merchant ships, and these Corsairs return to Tripoli. So, not a bad result for us, a little bit less than average, but we'll take the 3 Corsairs sunk. That's good enough, and we'll take the fact that the Corsairs only got 1 gold coin, giving them 6. That still leaves us a pretty good buffer as we head into the summer of 1804. Alrighty, so as we go to the summer now of 1804, we are going to play the card here, which is one of our core cards, Hammett's Army Created. Which basically says, playable if it's the spring of 1804 or later, which it is, and there's at least 1 American frigate in the harbor of Alexandria. Place 1 Marine and 5 Arabs in the city of Alexandria. So here, those are our invading force, and we'll be taking those to Dern with us. And they are ready to go, so that's one of the conditions. Now, this will trigger in the next turn a Tripolitan reaction. Let's see how this impacts their play. Actually, I made a mistake there. The event is triggered when the U.S. forces take Dern, so this doesn't trigger anything. Instead, we go through the Tripolitan kind of AI bot maneuvers, and we discover that it is time for them to once again draw a card from the top of their deck, as they don't have 5 Corsairs and none of the other conditions apply. So we drew this card here, which is actually an interesting result for them. This is the Philadelphia runs aground, and this represents a historical event that actually happened in the war, where the Philadelphia ran aground just outside of Tripoli and was captured by Tripolitan forces. That led to a daring raid by Stephen Decatur to actually set it afire and sink it. It was where he, as one of the great American naval heroes, kind of earned his reputation, if you would. So this card simulates that event of the Philadelphia, one of the U.S. frigates, running aground outside in the Tripoli harbor. And let's take a look and see how this plays out. So it's playable if there's at least 1 American frigate in the naval patrol zone of Tripoli, which there is. We have 7 frigates there. We're going to roll 1 die and apply the result. A 1 or a 2 is minor damage. Move an American frigate to the harbor of Malta. That's the best roll for us. A 3 or a 4 is a frigate sunk, which would now give Tripoli 1 of the 4 frigates they need to have sunk in order to win the game. 5 or 6 is the historical result, which is the frigate is captured. Take the American frigate as sunk and place 1 Tripolitan frigate in the harbor of Tripoli. So basically it simulates that they captured it's the switch of one of our frigates under their control. So this would give them 1 of the 2 frigates that they couldn't get in the game. We don't want a 5 or a 6. We want, at best, a 1 or a 2 would be one of our best results. Let's roll and see how closely we parallel history. A 2. Excellent. Very good. So minor damage means move an American frigate to the harbor of Malta. That's actually a big roll for us because getting the frigates in the harbor of Tripoli is really hard if Tripoli has a frigate there. That means they're only going to potentially get 1 frigate in the game, which is good for us. That's excellent because that gives us a lot better chance to be able to get the conditions to enforce that favorable peace treaty. So that was a big roll for us at this point in the game. So let's go to the fall of 1804 for the U.S. turn. The situation now outside of Dern is getting a little bit tense, and we're going to ratchet up the pressure a little bit more. These 5 troops here in Dern make me nervous because we can only attack with 6, and if this army is wiped out, it would be a battle to the death. If this army is wiped out, we lose the game. So we really want to tilt the odds in our favor here. And one of the ways we can do that is by coming in and trying a naval bombardment again, which is exactly what we'll do. So we're going to take the frigate that was returned to Malta and then 3 of the frigates that are in the patrol zone outside of Tripoli, pull them in and once again try some naval bombardment outside of Malta here. We're also going to bring in our 3 gunboats that will give us 11 rolls, 2 each for the frigates where we need a 6 and then 1 each for the 3 gunboats. So we will roll in sets of 4, 4, and 3. We need 6s to wipe out a land unit. I'm hopeful that we can get at least 2 of these land units here. Here's our first round. Yes! Okay, that gives us 1. Let's go now to our second roll. Nice, if we can get 2, that would be really good. Anything beyond 2 would be gravy. Yes, that gives us 2 forces wiped out. This is excellent. Good. Let's continue on here as the U.S. We have our gunboats to fire now. Our 3 gunboats. 1 off the board. Those will lock in place. And a 4. Not bad. So 11 rolls. We got 2 forces gone. Let's pull them out. That leaves only 3 military forces in the city of Dern for the Tripolitan forces, which tilts the odds pretty well in our favor. These 4 frigates will be returned to Malta, as go the gunboats, and that sets us up nicely for perhaps an invasion of Dern in the winter of 1804. Let's go to Tripoli's turn in the fall of 1804. Now, none of their cards, the 5 Corsair check doesn't apply because they only have 2, and none of their other cards apply either. So we're going to draw a card off the top of the deck for them, and we get Troops to Benghazi. Playable if Hammett's army has not captured Benghazi, which it hasn't. Benghazi is actually right here beside Tripoli. Place 2 Tripolitan infantry in the city of Benghazi. Okay? Now, that's actually not... I don't think that's too big of a deal for us because we don't have to capture Benghazi in order to enforce those peace treaty conditions. So we can hopefully ignore that, capture Dern, and then we might have enough conditions here to win the game. So let's continue on with the winter of 1804 for the U.S. Okay, we have a correction to make. I realized that I made a mistake in the spring of 1804 with Tripoli's card. This was the Philadelphia runs aground card, which we had to roll to see if the Philadelphia, the frigate, runs aground on the in turns over to Tripoli forces. There is a battle card that I should have played for Tripoli at that point in time, which basically is called Uncharted Waters. It says playable if the Philadelphia runs aground is the active event card for this turn. Roll 2 dice instead of 1 and choose the preferred result, which means that we should have rolled 2 dice instead of that 1 that we rolled. Now, fortunately, we can fix this pretty easily because we can roll this result, and if we happen to lose that frigate, we'll add 1 to Tripoli's harbor, and we'll reduce the patrol zone around Tripoli to 2. So we can adjust it, and it wouldn't have impacted what happened after that. So we're going to make that second roll right now, and if it's better than a 1 or a 2, we're going to give that result to Tripoli, and that will correct for that error. So we're hoping again for another 1 or a 2, but let's see what results we get here for this one. So this again, we're rolling on this Philadelphia runs aground card. Come on, give us another 1 or a 2. A 4. Ow, garbage. So that means a frigate is sunk. So we're going to take one of these 4 frigates that is outside the harbor of Tripoli. Now that would not have impacted anything that happened after that, so it doesn't change anything. This just corrects it. We're going to give that frigate to Tripoli. Now that reduces the U.S. frigates in the area from 8 to 7. It gives Tripoli one of the 4 frigates they need to win the game by sinking all 4 of our frigates. And that corrects our error that happened a couple of seasons ago. All right, it's time for some big moves here. Now, I was debating whether to play. We're going to do the attack of Dern, as we're going to play the U.S. card for that. And I was debating whether to delay by a season and first play this card here, which is Hammett recruits Bedouins, and basically says playable if Hammett's army has been created. Place 2 additional Arab infantry with Hammett's army. But I'm going to hope that a 6-3, 2-1 odds is going to favor us enough that we don't do this, because this will enable us to accelerate the end game by 1 whole season. So we are going to take the move of playing the General Eaton Attacks Dern card. And it says, move Hammett's army from Alexandria to Dern. So we're going to do that. We'll follow the instructions here. So this is the attack on Dern. Move up to 3 American frigates into the harbor of Dern. We will do that. We'll take them from Malta. We'll move them in here. And we can also bring these gunboats in for that as well, because they can always tag along with the frigates. Resolve the battle for Dern. Now, we have to win this one. And how this is basically going to play out is we get 1 round of naval bombardment on the military troops there with our ships that are there. And then we're going to have land combat between our Arab infantry and our U.S. Marine, the blue one, and then the 3 remaining, or whatever remains, of Tripoli's forces here. So the first thing we have to do is resolve the naval bombardment. So our 3 frigates get rolls, 2 dice rolls, so that gives us 6. And our gunboats get 1 roll, so that gives us 9. So we're going to take a chance here that we can actually roll 5 for one of these attacks. Actually, let's do 3 rounds of 3. So 3 rounds of 3 for our naval bombardment. If we could take out 1 or 2 of these units, that would be great. Here's our first round. Missed. We'll lock the 3 and a 4. 3 and a 4, nothing for us there. Yeah, let's get 1 here. Come on. Here's our second round. Yes! All right, so we get 1 eliminated with that. Our third round, let's have our gunboats fire now. Let's get 1 more. Oh, yes! Our Navy comes through. So that's outstanding. That gives us all 3 of these infantry units wiped out by our naval bombardment, which means that it's fairly certain here that we are actually going to be able to take the city of Dern. Now, however, we go to the land combat phase. It's not 100% certain. Well, actually it is, I think. But we do have 1 card that we're triggered to play here for the Tripolitan forces, which is Mercenaries Desert. And it says, playable at the start of a land battle. Before the battle starts, roll 1 die for each Arab infantry unit. For each 6, take an Arab infantry unit and return it to the supply. So, in this card, even though their forces are wiped out, there was a clarification made by the designer here who said that, yeah, you still can play this card even if there aren't land forces in the game at this point. So we're going to roll 5 dice for the Tripolitans, and on any roll of a 6, one of these Arab infantry units is wiped out. So hopefully we don't lose many, if any, of our troops here. Oops, that's 1. We'll lock that one in. 1. So we lose 1 of our Arabian allies here, leaving us with 4 and 1 Marine unit in there. But more importantly, we have now captured the city of Dern. We'll move our 3 frigates and our gunboats back to Malta. And that puts us ever so close to being able to claim this last peace treaty here. Let's go to the winter of 1804. The capture of Dern by U.S. forces immediately triggers the play of this card for Tripoli, which is Constantinople Sends Aid. Playable if Hammett's army has captured Dern. This is where it gets interesting. Place 1 Tripolitan frigate and 2 Tripolitan Corsairs in the harbor of Tripoli. Place 2 Tripolitan infantry in the city of Tripoli as well. This creates the problem for us now. This is kind of where we'll wrap up this episode as well, because we're probably close to a half an hour, and we'll play the last 2 years as we finish. So we have, in order to meet those peace treaty conditions, it has to be 1805 or later, which will happen the next season in the game. We have to have all of Tripoli's allies neutralized or not in play. Right now we do, although Algeria still potentially could come into the game should Tripoli draw that card. So we still have to watch out for that. So at the moment, though, we will meet both of those conditions in the next turn. Thirdly, we've captured Dern, which is the third condition, so that's met. The condition that we have left to meet is we have to remove and have to make sure there's no frigates in the harbor of Tripoli. And right now they have that one frigate. So when we come back in our next episode, everything's going to start to center on Tripoli here. Our hope is that we can draw that PD of Treese and Amity card that will allow us to play it. So we need to draw that card. We're going to reshuffle the discard deck and deal 6 cards. We want to get that in 1805 if we can. And we've also stockpiled those 3 cards that I mentioned that's going to let us come in and try to sneak attack and destroy this frigate in the harbor here. So if we could do that, potentially in 1805, we could force Tripoli to sign that peace treaty and we could come out victorious. But those cards might fail us. They hinge on die rolls. A lot of things can go wrong. Algeria could join in the war as Tripoli's ally, and we might not get a card that's going to take them out easily. So it still has a lot of potential to go in a lot of different wild directions. So this is far from over. In any case, we're going to wrap up here with 2 frigates in the patrol zone outside of Tripoli. Tripoli with a newly bolstered navy, and now finally has their own frigate to fight against our forces. We'll come back in 1805 to wrap up the game with the play of 1805 and 1806. Let me know what you think's going to happen. Are we going to be able to hang on for the victory? Is stuff going to go sideways again, and Tripoli's going to pull out the win, or what do you think? In any case, if you have enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new, please consider subscribing. We should be back on Tuesday for the final installment for this game, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.